I was 12 the year the mine shut for good, and half the town turned into ghosts who hadn't figured out they were dead yet. Houses sat empty with their windows punched out like missing teeth, and the only thing that still moved regular on our street was the wind dragging plastic bags down the cracked sidewalk. I side of the duplex was no 217. The other side, 217B, had been vacant since before I was born. You could stand in our living room and hear rats fighting in the walls next door, a sound like dry kindling snapping. Then one October morning, a rusted Chevy pickup coughed its way into the gravel drive next door, and a man got out carrying nothing but a green duffel and a paper grocery sack. He paid Mrs. Kincaid 3 months' rent in cash, 20 still banded from the bank, and that was the day Mr. Galt moved in. He wasn't loud. That was the first thing that felt wrong. In a town full of men who slammed doors and hollered at their dogs just because the air hurt their lungs, Mr. Galt moved like someone trying not to leave footprints. I only saw him from the neck up most days, pale forehead at the kitchen window or the top of a gray cap when he stepped onto the shared porch for his mail. He nodded once if you caught him, a small dip of the chin, nothing more. Mom said, "Leave a man alone. People got a right to their privacy." Dad, who was already drinking his breakfast by then, just grunted and said another mouth breathing the same ad didn't make no difference to him. The first strange thing was the mail slot. Ours was one of those old brass flaps set low in the front door, the kind you only see in pictures anymore. At night, when the house settled, it would creak a little on its spring. I started waking up around 3:30, to the soft metallic sigh of the slot lifting next door. Not ours, next door. The walls were so thin I could tell the difference. Lift, pause, drop. Lift, pause, drop. Like someone checking for something that never came. I'd lie there in the dark telling myself it was nothing, just a lonely man waiting on a letter. Kids do that, make up gentle stories so the dark don't eat 'em. Then came the night I realized the slot only opened when one of us walked past the hallway mirror. It was late November, cold enough that the windows had frost feathers on the inside. Mom was in the kitchen boiling potatoes. Dad passed out in his chair with the TV flickering blue on his face. I went to the bathroom and caught my reflection as I passed that long mirror we had hanging opposite the stairs. The mail slot next door lifted at the exact second my face crossed the glass. I froze. The flap hummed open maybe 3 inches, long enough for me to see a slice of darkness, and then the glint of an eye pressed right up against the brass from the other side. It didn't blink, it just looked. Then the flap fell with a soft clack, and everything was quiet again. I stood there so long my bare feet went numb on the linoleum. I didn't tell anybody. You don't when you're 12. You wait to see if the world rights itself. It didn't. After that, the eye was always there when I passed the mirror. Not every time. Mr. Galt was patient. Sometimes I'd walk back and forth 10 times, testing, hard hammering, and nothing would happen. Then on the 11th pass, the slot would ease up slow, like he'd been waiting to see how long I could stand the silence. Mom started finding things pushed under our door while we slept. Scraps of paper no bigger than postage stamps, pencil drawings so fine they looked like photographs. One was Dad asleep in his chair, mouth open, the glow of the TV carving shadows under his eyes, exact down to the dribble of spit on his chin. Another was Mom at the stove, the way her shoulders curved in when she thought nobody was watching. I found one of myself sitting on the porch steps picking at a scab, and I know for a fact nobody had been outside to see me do it. We never heard him draw them, never heard footsteps, never heard a chair scrape. Just a soft shuffle of paper under the door sometime between midnight and the first rooster. Winter got me in that year. Ice storm took the power for 9 days, and we lived by candlelight in the kerosene heater Dad kept in the living room. One night the wind was screaming hard enough to rattle the nails in the studs, and every candle in the house blew out at once. I was sent to find more in the hall closet. The mirror was nothing but a black void. I took 1 step past it, and the mail slot next door lifted by itself. No hand, no sound of breathing, just a flap rising like a mouth opening. Candle in my hand, I turned slow. There it was, the eye, lit orange by my flame, pressed so close to the slot I could see the red veins threaten the white. It didn't move, didn't blink, just looked. Then the flap fell, and the darkness felt heavier than before. That was when I started hearing my name inside the wall. Soft at first, like wind finding a crack. Jay, Bird, the nickname only my grandpa ever used before he died. It would come from the direction of my bedroom, low and raspy, traveling through the plaster like the house itself had learned to speak. I'd sit up in bed and shine my flashlight at the shared wall. Nothing, just faded wallpaper with steamboats on it. But the voice kept coming, patient, like it had all the time in the world. Sometimes it would wait until I was almost asleep and then whisper it right against my ear, close enough I felt the breath. I stopped sleeping, stopped talking much either. Mom thought I had the flu that wouldn't leave. The drawings kept coming. Whoever slipped them under the door started leaving them face down now. And when you turned them over, you wished you hadn't. They were still us, same faces, same rooms, but wrong. Dad with his eyes open in his sleep, black circles scratched in so hard the pencil broke through the paper. Mom standing at the sink with a mouth sewn shut by tiny X's. Me, over and over, always me, standing in front of that hallway mirror, while something behind the glass wore my face, but smiled too wide. Dad said it was kids, said he'd catch 'em and wear 'em out. He sat up one night with his shotgun across his knees and a bottle between his boots. Fell asleep by midnight. Next morning there was a new drawing wedged under the door. Dad exactly as he'd passed out, head tipped back, mouth open, but the eyes were scratched out completely, just raw white holes. We should have left then. Pride and empty wallets kept us longer than since. The last night we spent in that house, the temperature dropped so low the kerosene heater couldn't keep up. I was in my room trying to do homework by flashlight when the whispering started again, closer than ever. Jay, Bird, come look. It wasn't coming from the wall anymore. It was coming from inside my dresser, the one pushed up against the shared wall. The middle drawer was cracked open an inch, and I could see something moving in the dark space behind it. I didn't want to. God help me I didn't, but I crawled across the bed and pulled the drawer all the way out. There was a hole in the back of the dresser, neat and round, maybe 3 inches across. Fresh plaster dust still clung to the edges. I shone my light in and saw straight through to the other side. 217B, Mr. Galt's bedroom, lit by a single candle stub. And in the candlelight, on his knees, was Mr. Galt himself, face pressed to his side of the hole, eye wide and waiting. When the beam hit him, he smiled slow, like I'd finally come to a party he'd been planning for months. Then he put his finger to his lips and eased back out of sight. I screamed then, screamed until Mom and Dad came running. Dad yanked the dresser away from the wall, and there it was, the hole. And on my side, a little black lens cap lying in the dust like a dropped coin. He didn't say much after that, just started throwing things into boxes with a speed I'd never seen, sober or drunk. We left at 4 in the morning, drove to my aunt's place in Charleston with nothing but what fit in a truck bed. Never went back, not even for the furniture. Years later, when I was grown and thought I'd outrun it, I looked up the address on one of those real estate sites. The listing showed our old half of the duplex for rent again. The photos were bright and cheerful, fresh paint. Nobody would ever know. But when I clicked through to the hallway shot, there it was, the long mirror opposite the stairs, same as always. And in the reflection, just for a second before the page loaded the next picture, I saw a shape standing behind where the camera had been. Pale forehead, gray cap, one eye catching the flash like a nickel in a creek bed. I closed the laptop and haven't been back to that town since. Some nights, though, when the house is quiet and I pass a mirror without meaning to, I still hear that soft metallic sigh. Lift, pause, drop. And I know better than to look too close, because whatever's waiting on the other side has had 25 years to practice. I was 9 the summer Miss Lorraine came to the Holler. The little white house at the bend of the gravel road had stood empty since I could remember. Windows dark, porch sagging like a tired dog. Folks said her husband, Ray, went up on Black Mountain one October morning to check his ginseng patches and never came down. Search parties looked for 3 weeks, found his hat hanging on a laurel branch and nothing else. After the funeral with an empty casket, Lorraine left for a spell, stayed with Ken in Virginia. Then, one day in late May, a gray station wagon rolled in, back hatch full of cardboard boxers and a single rocking chair tied on top with baling twine. She stepped out in a faded calico dress, hair twisted up with bobby pins, and smiled at the mountains like they'd kept her place warm. At first, she was just a quiet widow lady who waved when you passed. She kept her yard swept clean with a worn-out broom and set out saucers of milk for stray cats that never seemed to drink it. Mom said it was Christian to be neighborly, so when Miss Lorraine knocked one afternoon asking to borrow a cup of flour because her canister had rusted shut, Mom sent me over with it. She took the measuring cup with both hands, fingers cold even in the heat, and thanked me in a voice soft as creek moss. "Bless your heart, sugar. Folks been so kind." That was the beginning. Next time it was a candle during a thunderstorm, then a pinch of salt to throw over my shoulder. Bad luck been dogging me. Each time she'd stand in the doorway and talk just long enough for the sweat to dry on your neck, asking gentle questions about school, about Mama's garden, about how old my little sister Clara was now. She always remembered Clara's age exact. I'd go home and forget about it until the next knock came. The borrowing got stranger slow, like a frog in warming water. One evening she asked for a lock of Clara's hair. "Just a snippet, honey. I make memory quilts, see? And I lost all my scraps when Ray disappeared. Blonde like hers is so pretty in the pattern." Mom hesitated, but Clara was only 4 and thought it was a game. I snipped a curl while Miss Lorraine watched with shining eyes. She tucked it in a little cloth pouch and pressed it to a heart like a locket. 2 days later, Clara's favorite rag doll turned up missing. We searched high and low, even under the house where the spiders live. Never found it. Then she wanted a photograph of our dog Buster. Said she missed having a hound around, that looking at his picture on her mantle would be a comfort. Dad grumbled but dug an old Polaroid out of a drawer. The next morning Buster wouldn't come when we called. Found him sitting on Miss Lorraine's porch, tail thumping slow, staring up at her screen door like he was waiting on permission to leave. Dad carried him home cussing, and Buster slept for 2 days straight, wouldn't eat, just lay under the porch whining in his sleep. Things kept walking off after that. Dad's good pocket knife, Mama's mother's thimble, my Sunday school pen with the tiny gold cross. Always the day after we lent Miss Lorraine something small. We'd tell a house apart and never find him, but sometimes if the wind was right, you could smell wood smoke from her chimney when she hadn't burned a fire in weeks. Dad said it was nonsense, said widows get peculiar, said mind your manners, but he started locking the doors at night, something nobody in that holler had done in 50 years. The last time she knocked was the first week of November, cold enough that the mud froze in ruts. I opened the door to find her standing there in her housecoat and slippers, holding a little paring knife and a white pottery bowl. The porch light made her eyes look sunk way back in her head. "Evening, honey," she said, voice trembling like she'd walked farther than next door. "My roses out back are looking peaked. Just need a drop of good hot blood to set 'em right. Yours would do nicely, strong growing boy like you." She held out the bowl and smiled the way grandmas do in storybooks, except a smile never reached those hollow eyes. I slammed the door so hard the grass rattled and ran to get Dad. He was already halfway down the hall, face red, telling her through the wood that she'd lost her damn mind and to get off our property. Her reply came soft through the door. "That's all right. I understand. Some things can't be rushed." That night, every light bulb in the house blew at once, not flickered, blew. Glass popping like gunshots, showering the floors with tiny shards that glittered in the dark. We sat in the living room with flashlights shaking in our hands, Clara crying into Mama's neck. Then we heard it, the slow, deliberate creak creak, creak of a rocking chair directly above us. Our house was one story. There was no room above the living room, just attic insulation and mouse nests. But the rocking went on steady, same rhythm I'd heard 100 times drifting from her porch on summer evenings. Back and forth, slow enough to count heartbeats between creaks. It didn't stop until the rooster started at dawn. Dad called the sheriff that morning. Deputy came out, hat in hand, looking embarrassed. Said Miss Lorraine was a grown woman and free to rock wherever she pleased, long as she wasn't hurting nobody. Dad told him about the lights, about the knife, about everything gone missing. Deputy promised to have a talk. He walked over, knocked, went inside maybe 5 minutes, came back adjusting his belt, and told us she was just a lonely old woman who missed her husband something fierce. Said there were cats all over the house, dozens of them, and maybe the smell was off, but nothing illegal. Dad asked about the rocking chair on our ceiling, and the deputy just looked at his boots. We started sleeping in shifts after that. Somebody always awake with the 410 across their lap. The knocking stopped, but the borrowing feeling never left. You'd reach for something and know before you looked that it was already gone. 3 weeks later, Mama noticed the jar. It was on the windowsill above the kitchen sink where the African violet used to sit. None of us had put it there. Just a little glass jelly jar with a rusted lid and a strip of masking tape on the side. Written on the tape in spidery pencil, Clara. Inside floated a pale curl of blind hair and what looked like a tiny white tooth. Clara had lost that tooth the summer before, put it under her pillow for kids do. We'd never found it that morning, figured it rolled under the dresser. Mama dropped the jar screaming. It shattered on the linoleum, milk-smelling water spreading across the floor. Dad went next door with the shotgun that very hour. Door was unlocked, hanging open a crack. He called for Miss Lorraine and got no answer, just a low hum of flies. The house smelled wrong, like wet dirt and sweet rot. Every room was bare, except the kitchen. Shelves had been built floor to ceiling along one wall, dozens of jars marching in neat rows. Each one labeled in that same careful handwriting. Names I knew. Old Mrs. Cornett, who died last spring. Tommy Pratt, who moved to Ohio. The Baker twins lost in '89. And ours. Mama's jar held her silver thimble and a dried red rose petal. Dad's had the missing pocket knife and a single work boot lace. Mine held a Sunday school pen and a scrap of flannel from my favorite shirt the year I was 7. Clara's jar was the biggest. Hair, tooth, ragdoll dress scraps, even a tiny smear of what might have been blood on the glass inside. Dad said later he stood there so long the flies settled on his neck and he didn't feel him. Miss Lorraine was gone. No clothes in the closets, no food in the pantry, bed stripped to the mattress. Just the rocking chair in the middle of the living room facing our house, still warm when Dad touched it, and scratched into the floorboards beneath it over and over until the knife tip broke. Mine, now. We left that same day, packed what we could carry and drove to my aunt's in Tennessee before dark. Never went back, not even when the bank sent papers years later saying the place was ours if we paid the back taxes. Some things ain't worth any price. Sometimes when I'm rocking my own daughter to sleep, I catch a whiff of that sweet rot smell and the chair creaks once, just once, like something on the roof is testing the rhythm. I hold her tighter and hum louder than I need to because I know what lonely sounds like when it learns your name. And every spring, no matter where we live, a single red rose blooms somewhere it shouldn't. Beside the mailbox, under the car tire, once even inside the locked glove box. Always perfect, always thornless, always smelling faintly of creek moss and cold fingers. I cut them down every time. They grow back anyway. We moved to Clintwood because the city has started to feel like it was squeezing the air out of us. My wife Sarah was pregnant with our first, and every siren that screamed past our apartment window felt like a warning. When the little white house on Piney Ridge Road came up for sale, 3 bedrooms, half acre, $15,000 under appraisal, we loaded everything we owned into a rented trailer and drove south until the mountains closed behind us like a door. The realtor said the place next door had been empty 6 years, ever since the old man who owned it passed in his sleep. Same floor plan as ours, mirror image, just flipped. Twin houses, she called them, and laughed like it was cute. We painted the nursery the softest yellow we could find, and hung a porch swing we bought at the salvage yard in Grundy. Sarah would sit out there in the evenings, one hand on her belly, humming old hymns while the crickets tuned up. The first week was perfect, quiet enough to hear a creek a quarter-mile down the ridge, loud enough with birds that you never felt alone. I remember thinking maybe this was what peace actually felt like. Then the curtains went up next door. Sarah noticed first. She was folding tiny onesies on the kitchen table when she looked out the window and froze. "Eli," she said, voice small, "did you hang curtains in the other house?" I laughed, told her the pregnancy brain was kicking in early. But when I stepped onto the porch, I saw them. Pale blue with little white sailboats, exactly the ones we'd put up in the nursery the day before. Same length, same little pleats at the top. The empty house stared back at us with our own curtains in its eyes. I told myself somebody bought it, quiet, maybe fixing it up to flip. People do that. But no cars ever came, no work trucks, no ladders or paint cans, just the curtains hanging perfect and still, like they'd grown there overnight. A few nights later, the porch swing appeared. Same shade of forest green we painted ours, same rusty chains that squeaked in the same off-key note. It rocked once when the wind picked up, slow, like someone had just stood and walked away. Sarah wouldn't sit on our swing after that. She said the sound made her skin crawl, like hearing your own voice on a recording you don't remember making. We started hearing footsteps. It was subtle at first, one room behind, always. I'd walk to the kitchen for water and hit a soft pad of bare feet in the living room next door. Same rhythm, same pause at the hallway. Sarah would close the bedroom door at night, and a door would close next door just a second later. We laughed it off its thin walls, echo, mountain acoustics. But the house next door was 40 feet away across a strip of grass. Sound doesn't travel like that. Sarah stopped laughing the Sunday we came home early from church. The sermon ran long and the baby was kicking up a storm, so we slipped out before the last hymn. We pulled into the driveway and both of us went still. In the front windows of an empty house, shadows moved. My shadow hung up an invisible coat on a hook that didn't exist. Sarah's shadow poured tea from a pot into a cup, lifted it, set it down. Then the shapes turned toward each other and raised their arms, exactly like we had the night before, where we'd argued about money, about whether we could really afford this life we'd chosen. The silent reenactment lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like watching ourselves drown in slow motion. Sarah grabbed my hand so hard her nails left crescents. "That didn't happen," she whispered. I couldn't answer. The shadows finished the argument, turned away, and the windows went dark again. We started sleeping with the lights on. Every light in the house, like brightness could keep the mimicry out. It didn't. The footsteps grew bolder. Sometimes they'd be ahead of us, me reaching for the bedroom light switch and hearing it click next door a heartbeat before my fingers touched plastic. Sarah swore she heard the baby crying at night, thin and sharp, coming from the nursery next door. We didn't have a baby yet. She was only 7 months along. I tried rational things, walked the property line with a flashlight, looking for footprints, for any signs someone was coming and going. Nothing. The grass between the houses was thick and untouched, not even bent. I called the realtor, asked if the bank had sold it quiet. She checked, called back sounding confused. Title still showed the estate of Harold Dean McCoy, deceased 2017. No activity, no showings, no offers. "You sure those curtains weren't there when you moved in?" she asked. I hung up without answering. The handprints showed up on a Tuesday. Sarah screamed from the nursery and I ran in thinking something happened with the baby. She stood at the window pointing across the gap. On the inside of the glass next door, at toddler height, were 2 perfect greasy handprints, palms flat, fingers splayed, like a child had been locked in there trying to see out. The glass was dusty, had been dusty for years, but the prints were fresh, edges still damp when I walked over and looked closer. I pressed my hand to our side of the window and felt the cold seep through. Sarah started crying, the deep kind that comes from somewhere lower than tears. "That's not funny, Eli. That's not funny anymore." We called the sheriff. 2 deputies came, walked through both houses with flashlights swinging, found nothing but mouse droppings and mildew. One of them, Ricky, I went to school with him, lingered in the nursery next door, shining his light on the prints. "Kids," he said, but his voice cracked on the word. "Kids get in everywhere." Sarah asked how kids got in when the doors were bolted from the inside and the boats were rusted solid. Ricky just looked at his boots. That night, the mimicry stopped being polite. We were in bed, lights blazing, when the crying started again. Louder, desperate. Not from the nursery next door this time, from inside our own walls, like the sound was traveling through the studs. Sarah sat up, clutching a belly, eyes wide. "That's my baby," she said. "That's the cry he makes when he has nightmares in my dreams." I tried to hold her, but she pushed her away and ran to the window. Across the gap, every light in the other house was on. Our lights. In the nursery window stood a shape, small, rounded at the top, like a child standing on tiptoe, pressing those same greasy palms to the glass. It rocked side to side, the way Sarah rocked when the heartburn got bad. I don't remember deciding to leave. I only remember moving, throwing diapers and photo albums and the ultrasound picture into the car, while Sarah sat in the passenger seat, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. It was 2:17 a.m. when I turned the key. As we rolled past the house next door, its porch light began to flick. On, off, on, off, off, on, off. The exact pattern we'd fallen into months ago. 2 short for Sarah, 3 long for the baby, 1 short for me. Good night, sleep tight. The bulb glowed warm and welcoming, like it was proud we'd finally noticed. We drove until the mountains opened up and let us out. Found a motel outside Abingdon and slept for 14 hours with the curtains wired shut. In the morning, Sarah said she wasn't going back, not ever, and I told her she never had to. We sold the house over the phone for whatever the bank would take, never asked what happened to our things. Years later, when my son was 4, he started talking about his other house. Said it looked just like ours, only backwards, and sometimes he woke up there and couldn't find us. The first time I laughed, ruffled his hair, told him dreams are funny. The second time he woke up crying because the other mama poured tea wrong and the other daddy yelled too loud. The third time he drew a picture. 2 white houses side by side, one with a yellow swing, one with a green. In the window at a green one, he drew a little boy waving with both handprints on a glass. We moved 3 states away the next month. Some nights I still check real estate listings when I can't sleep. The house on Piney Ridge pops up every few years, price lower each time, photos brighter. The curtains in the nursery, they're always pale blue with white sailboats. The porch swing is always forest green. And if you look close at the window shots, really close, you can see the faint smudge of small palms on the inside of the glass, waiting. I never zoom in far enough to be sure. But sometimes, when the baby monitor crackles just right, I hear a second swing creaking in perfect time with ours. And I know somewhere back in those mountains, the lights still flick good night in our old rhythm, patient as stone, until somebody else comes home. I was 16 and working the produce stand at the edge of Jellicoe, Tennessee, when folks started whispering about Miss Eula again. Jellicoe's the kind of town where everybody knows your business before you do. Coal dust in the lungs, prayers in the pews, and secrets that hang in the hollows like fog. Miss Eula lived in a shotgun house up on Laurel Hill, 2 stories of clapboard leaning into the mountain like it was tired of standing straight. Her boy, Tommy, got crushed in a 07 mine back in '89. Roof collapse, they said. Pulled him out in pieces wrapped in a tarp. She buried what she could in the Baptist cemetery and went on like he'd just gone off to school. After the funeral, she set an extra place at her supper table every night. Folks saw the plate through the window, biscuits cool and untouched, milk going sour by morning. She'd talk to his bedroom door upstairs, voice carrying on still evenings. "Tommy, you finished that arithmetic? Mama's got cornbread, huh? Kids dared each other to sneak up close, but nobody did after the Miller boy came back white as quartz, swearing he heard a child's laugh from the dark upstairs. We grew up with it, though. Miss Eula was harmless, just a mother who couldn't let go. We mowed her yard for $1, fetched her mail. Life moved on. Then last fall, after the leaves turned bloody red, the figure started appearing in her upstairs window. First person to mention it was old Mr. Hargrove, delivering propane. He pulled up at dusk, saw the shape sitting there, small, slouched forward with elbows on the seal, red ball cap pulled low, exact like Tommy wore the summer before the mine. Hargrove called hello and swore the figure lifted a hand, slow, like waving from a school bus. He told it at the diner next morning, and by noon half the town drove by slow. I did it myself one evening after closing the stand. There it was, right on cue as the sun dipped, shoulders narrow under a flannel shirt, cap brim casting shadow over the face. It didn't move much, just sat, watching the road. When I waved tentative, the hand came up again, pale fingers wiggling like it knew me. Word spread quiet, the way bad news does in these parts. Cars slowed at all hours. Some left casseroles on a porch. Miss Eula never acknowledged it. She'd wave from her rocker, same as always, eyes milky behind thick glasses. "Y'all drive safe now," she'd call, like the whole town wasn't staring at her ghost boy. Nobody else would deliver her groceries after that. The Piggly Wiggly boy quit cold, said he felt hands on his neck in her kitchen. So I took it over. 2 bags a week, $15 cash, easy money for a kid with a truck older than me. First few times it was normal, her fussing over bruised tomatoes, asking after my mama sciatica. She'd slip an extra $5 in my palm and send me off with cornbread wrapped in foil. But every visit, I'd feel it upstairs, floorboards creaking soft, like bare feet padding back and forth. Once I caught the bedroom door ajar from the hall, heard a low hum, some old hymn, off-key, child's voice maybe. Miss Eula just smiled and closed it gentle. Winter came hard, ice glazing the roads like bad intentions. Deliveries got trickier, but the money was steady, and Mama needed a church pledge field. One night in January, snow flurrying thick, I crunched up her walk with the bags. Her porch light buzzed yellow, moths battering the bulb. She met me at the door in her wool housecoat, thinner than last time, skin hanging loose on her bones. "Lord, child, come in from the cold," she said, voice papery. I stomped snow off my boots, handed over the bags. That's when she looked up the stairs, eyes soft. "Tommy ain't at supper yet. Would you carry his tray, Connie? Mama's knees won't take the steps tonight." I should have said no, should have made excuse about the roads, but $15 twice a week was gas money, and her eyes pleaded like a whipped dog. She fixed a tray quick, bowl of potato soup steaming, 2 biscuits buttered thick, glass of milk beaded with cold. "Tell him Mama loves him," she whispered, pressing a worn photo into my hand. Tommy at 8, gap-toothed grin under that red cap. I took the stairs slow, wood groaning under me, air getting thicker, like breathing through wet cloth. The hallway smelled of damp plaster, and something sharper, like fresh dug earth after rain. His door hung cracked, yellow lamplight spilling out. I nudged it with my elbow, heart thumping steady. The room was small, wallpaper peeling in strips, single bed against a far wall. A shape lay under the covers, lumps small and still, rising slow, up, down, like breathing deep in sleep. Red cap poked out at the headboard, bill curled up. Feet stuck out the bottom, socks darned too many times. The window behind was cracked open an inch, snowflakes melting on the seal, curtain limp. I stepped closer, tray balanced heavy, set it on the nightstand, careful not to rattle the spoon. That's when the hand came out. It shot from under the quilt like a pale snake, fingers wrapping my wrist cold as creek stones. Skin felt wrong, loose, slick, like it'd been soaking too long. I froze, tray tipping, milk sloshing over the rim. The voice came then, right by my ear, not Miss Eula's rattle, but a boy, thin, dusty, like words scraped from gravel. "Tell Mama I ain't hungry no more." Air moved with the whisper, smelling of coal smoke and rot. I jerked back, hands slipping free, tray crashing to the floor. Soup splattered black across the boards, biscuits rolling into shadow. The shape under the covers didn't stir, but the red cap tilted just a fraction, like listening. I ran, stumbled down the stairs 2 at a time, slammed into the kitchen wall. Miss Eula stood at the stove, stirring nothing, humming that same off-key hymn. "He eat good?" she asked, not turning. I couldn't speak, just shook my head wild, bolted for the door. Her voice followed soft. "He'll come around. Boys get picky." I drove home blind, truck fishtailing on ice, that photo burned in my pocket. Burned it in the sink that night, watched Tommy's grin curl black. Didn't sleep. Told myself it was a prank, some cousin's kid hiding for laughs, but the feeling of that hand clung like damp rot. Next morning, sirens woke to Holler. Miss Eula's house was gone, smoke rolling thick from blackened timbers, flames still licking a roof. Folks gathered in robes and coats, murmuring. I pushed through, stomach sour. Fire chief knew my face, waved me closer. "You deliver for her?" I nodded. He sighed, spat tobacco juice. Whole place went up fast, like it was soaked in kerosene. They let me walk the ashes later, when it cooled enough. Upstairs bedroom was mostly intact, walls charred but standing. Bed gone, just twisted springs. Sheets burned to rags in a corner. And there, curled tight in the middle at a mattress frame, a pile of coal dust, child-sized, knees to chest, arms wrapped round like sleeping. Red cap sat beside it, untouched by fire, bill curled perfect. Chief kicked at a gentle, dust sifting through his boot treads. No body said, just this, like to mind give him back. Miss Eula was never found. Some said she walked into the woods that night, calling Tommy's name till her voice gave out. Others figured she torched it herself, couldn't take the empty plate no more. Town tore a place down quick, leveled it flat, planted grass that never took. But up on Laurel Hill, if you drive slow at dusk when the year's turning cold, you can still see a shape in the window frame where the house used to stand. Small, slouched, red cap low, wave sometimes, slow. I quit the produce stand, took night shifts at the mine entrance instead. Money's the same, but I don't deliver no more. Some nights, loading gravel in the dark, I hear that whisper on the wind, "Tell Mama." And I wonder if Tommy ever got hungry again, or if he's still waiting, patient as dust, for somebody to carry up the tray. Last fall, after I drove by it a lot on the way to visit kin, grass finally grew, thick and green. But in the dusk, sitting cross-legged right where the window used to be, there he was, slouch perfect, cap red as fresh blood. Waved when he saw my truck slow. I didn't wave back. Just gunned it down the hill, heart pounding like a timpani in my chest. These mountains keep what they take, and sometimes they give it back wrong. I was 21 when Grandma had her stroke, the kind that hits quiet, no warning, no drama, just a soft thump in the kitchen, and then she was on the linoleum scaring at the ceiling like it had told her a secret. The ambulance took her to Clinch Valley, and the doctor said she could come home if somebody stayed with her round the clock. Mama worked doubles at the textile plant in Richlands, so it fell to me. I moved into the spare room of the little green house on Red Root Hollow, 2 miles past where the pavement gives up and the mountains decide they've had enough of people. 2 lots down, really just a wide spot in the weeds, sat old man Cletus's trailer. Single wide, white turned gray, porch half rotted so it tilted toward the creek. He'd lived there longer than I'd been alive. Nobody knew exactly how old he was. The story went that he came home from Korea with 1 duffel and no family, bought the land with discharge pay, and never left again. From the time I was little, he was already the fixture, sitting in a cane-bottom rocker that never seemed to wear out, staring straight ahead down the dirt track that passed for a road. Rain or shine, July heat or January ice, there he was. Cold if it was cold, bare-chested if it was hot, always the same. But the thing that crawled under your skin and nested there was that he never blinked. Kids tested it. We'd ride our bikes past real slow, staring, waiting for the moment his lids would drop. They never did. His eyes were pale blue, watery like creek ice in March, and they stayed open, fixed on something none of us could see. Wave, and he'd raise one finger off the armrest, just one, slow, like he was acknowledging a debt. Scream at him, throw a rock, whatever. The result was the same. One finger, no blink. After a while, you stopped trying. You just felt those eyes follow you until you rounded the bend and the laurels hid you. Grandma used to say, "Leave Cletus be. Some men seen things that burn the blank right out of 'em." She'd cross herself when she said it, even though we weren't Catholic. The first week I stayed with her, nothing felt off. Nights were loud with katydids and the creek talking to itself. I'd help her to the bathroom, change the sheets when she couldn't make it, heat soup she barely touched. She slept most of the time, mouth open, breathing wet. I slept light, listening for her, and every night at 11:17 exactly, same as the clock on the stove, his porch light came on. One bare bulb under a rusted coffee can shield, buzzing like a dying wasp. I'd stand at the window and see the glow spill across his yard, silver on the weeds, and there he'd be in the rocker, staring straight at Grandma's bedroom window. Not moving, not rocking, just looking. The light stayed on until 11:44, then clicked off, every single night. I told myself it was habit, old man with nothing else to do. But Grandma got worse after the light started coming on. She'd wake gasping, eyes wide, whispering, "He's looking again, darling, tell him I ain't ready." I'd sit on the edge of the bed and hold her hand until she drifted off, but her pulse fluttered like a trapped moth. February rolled in mean. Ice storm took the power for 3 days, lines snapping like gunfire up on the ridge. We kept warm with the propane heater in every quilt in the house. Grandma lay curled under them, skin hot to the touch, eyes sunk deep. The night had got worse. The wind howled so hard the windows rattled in their frames. Power was out everywhere, black dark that swallowed the hollow hole. I sat up with her, lantern between us, reading psalms aloud, because it was the only thing that settled her. At 11:17, the light came on next door. Not possible. The whole grid was down. I'd watched the transformer explode in a green flash 2 nights earlier. But there it was, that sickly bulb glowing steady, cutting a tunnel through the sleet. I went to the window, breath fogging the glass. Cletus wasn't in his rocker. He was standing in the open doorway of the trailer, no coat, shirt plastered to his bones by the rain, and he was smiling. I'd never seen him smile before, lips peeled back just enough to show teeth the color old piano keys. His eyes caught the light, wide, unblinking, fixed on our house, on Grandma's window, on me. I don't know how long I stood there. The smile never wavered. Then the bulb flickered once and went dark, but the after image burned behind my eyes all night. Grandma died before sunrise. I found her when the birds started, still in the same position I'd left her. Cub was tucked to her chin, but her eyes were open, not peaceful, open like she'd seen something and couldn't look away. Pupils blown wide, black swallowing the hazel I'd known my whole life. I closed them gentle, fingers shaking, and called the coroner. He came at noon, wrote natural causes on the form, didn't linger. Said it happens sometimes with strokes, the eyes stay open. But I saw the way he crossed himself when he thought I wasn't looking. Cletus never sat on his porch again. The rocker stayed empty, chains creaking when the wind pushed it. Folks said he must have passed too, but nobody checked. The trailer just sat there, weeds growing taller, windows going blind with dust. I stayed on a few weeks to settle the estate. Every night I waited for 11:17, half expecting the light. It never came. But I started feeling watched in a different way, like the gaze had come inside the house with me. I'd catch movement in the mirror when there was nothing behind me. Wake up with the feeling someone had just stepped back from the bedside. Once I found the quilt folded down neat on Grandma's side of the bed, though I hadn't touched it. The morning I left for good, I walked down to Cletus's place. Door was unlocked, hanging open an inch. Inside smelled of wet ash and something sweet gone bad. The Raka sat in the living room facing the window that looked straight at Grandma's house. On the floor in front of it, scratched deep into the linoleum with what must have been a knife, were two perfect circles, side by side. Eyes, lids carved away so they stayed open forever. In the left one, someone had pressed a single gray hair, curled like a question mark. Grandma's color. I backed out, shut the door, and never went near the hollow again. Years later, when my own eyes started getting me trouble, dry, burning, hard to close at night, the doctor said it was just strain. I take the drops, but they don't help much. Some nights I sit on whatever porch I've got, rocking slow, and feel the old pull. Like something out there in the dark is still waiting for me to lift one finger in greeting. And when the wind moves just right through the trees, I swear I hear a rocker that isn't there, creaking steady, patient, keeping time. I don't blink much anymore. Can't seem to remember how.